Vladimir Putin's ruthless invasion, the largest land invasion in Europe since Adolf Hitler, trying to blame that on actually the victims of that invasion.
We'll get to the New York Post in just a moment. We want to get to Richard Engel, who has a tight window. But here's what the Wall Street Journal editorial board was reacting to. President Trump blaming Ukraine for Russia's invasion nearly 3 years ago. He made the comments yesterday after reporters pressed him on Ukrainian officials not being involved in the diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Russia in Saudi Arabia.
I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their sides. You have those magnificent golden domes that are shattered, will never be replaced. You can't replace them. 1,000-year-old domes that are so beautiful, you can't replace that. The whole civilization has changed because of what. So when they're worried about not being seated, you mean somebody that should have gone in and made a deal a long time ago. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And yeah, I would say that, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
That actually is a Russia thing. That actually is a Russia thing. You're talking about democratic elections in Ukraine, but suggesting that somehow Russia is... Mika, there's so many things wrong with that. I know you've got a fact check on it. I will say, first of all, the idea that they could have just given away a little land to Vladimir Putin, wrong. He wanted Kyiv. He wanted to be in Kyiv in 3 days. He wanted Odessa. He wanted to rebuild the old Russian Empire by seizing their capital, Kyiv, and Odessa. So the idea that is so factually inaccurate. There's not a single military historian, there's not a single person who's covered this war that would actually say that's accurate. But there's so many other things in those statements that are just flat wrong factually.
Yes. A quick fact check on that last comment. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's public approval rating has dropped since the early days of the war, but he still has support from 52% of Ukrainians, according to a poll last month. Let's bring in NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, live from the front lines near Kharkiv, Ukraine. Richard, you've been speaking with Ukrainian soldiers. How are they feeling about these negotiations?
So Ukrainian soldiers are watching this very closely, or as close as they can, in frontline positions. They don't always have internet, but they do have cell phone connections generally. And they've been watching this with a lot of concern. They are worried that decisions about Ukraine are being made without Ukrainians' input. They worry that Presidents Trump and Putin are in the process of chopping up this country. Currently, Russia controls about 20% of Ukraine's territory in the east, where I am right now, also in the south. And they are deeply concerned watching this process, considering the fact that President Trump has already spoken with Vladimir Putin, the fact that he started these negotiations by talking to the Russian side, excluding President Zelensky, and then, as you said last night, blaming the entire war on Ukraine instead of on the Russians who actually invaded. Soldiers here are watching this and thinking they're on the chopping block. They're about to be divided and have territories ceded to to Russia. As you know, there's an old expression in negotiations: if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And people here feel very much that Ukraine is on the table right now. And President Zelensky commented just a short while ago about those comments from President Trump, saying that he's responsible for this war. If he'd only done some sort of deal early on, it never would have happened if he had ceded territory. And he said that President Trump is in a disinformation bubble, parroting, it sounds like, Russian disinformation, taking Russia's take on the war. And he said that he wants U.S. officials, particularly Trump's envoy, to come hear more and learn more truth about the facts on the ground. And Trump's envoy, former General Kellogg, has just arrived in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are eager to take him out to places like this to try and rewrite the narrative that President Trump is describing right now.
NBC's Richard Engel, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it. Ukrainian soldiers hearing this, understanding that their land has been invaded, their children kidnapped, their mothers shot and killed at point-blank range, apartment buildings attacked. David Ignatius, you know, it's always been an article of faith for Republicans and for conservatives that you don't bow down to Russian leaders. The consequences, absolutely terrible. It's debatable, but, you know, Republicans accused FDR of giving up Eastern Europe at Yalta. They attacked John F. Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs. You can go to Jimmy Carter negotiating SALT II with the Russians when they invaded Afghanistan. You can actually go to George W. Bush once again, trying to make nice with Russians, with Vladimir Putin saying, "I looked into his eyes and I saw his soul." Vladimir Putin responded in 2007 with a fire and brimstone speech, basically predicting everything he was going to do. Then he invaded the country of Georgia. Barack Obama talking about a reset and whispering to Medvedev, "Hey, I can do more with you after the election." And after the election, what happened? Ukraine invaded. Crimea invaded by Putin. A commercial airliner shot down. We can go on. And then, of course, 2022, the largest landmass invasion of Europe since Adolf Hitler. It is. Please tell me how you're right now sifting through all of this wreckage of American U.S. foreign policy that has kept the world free for 80 years.
So, Joe, yesterday was in many ways a shame.